It's really a pleasure for us to be here, for me to be here at La Jolla Country Day, and to partner with the City Club. And the City Club is such a special institution. You know, it started in 1975, and in all these years, it's put on over 1,000 programs. So I imagine George is just exhausted by now. But it's really testament to his great work, and I think we can learn about city issues and then also a lot of different baseball facts, which is also of great importance. So the National Conflict Resolution Center, we focus on mediation and conflict resolution. We provide training and we provide these services. And people always say, so Steve, why don't you go to Washington? That's really where we need you. And we would do that, but we've been so busy in San Diego because there's been so many issues in our own city. And just this past August, one of the advisors to our board, Judge Larry Irving, of course, conducted the mediation with Mayor Filner. So while we like doing work, I hope that moving into the future, we won't need to have to use our services in the city going forward. And I don't think we will, because we have 4 outstanding candidates that are running for mayor. And one of them we have today, Michael Aguirre. I just want to give you a brief background of his experience. Michael has a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and a law degree from the University of California, Berkeley, from Bolt. He's the former Assistant U.S. District Attorney, Assistant Counsel to the U.S. Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, Adjunct Professor of History at the University of Southern California, and of course, former San Diego City Attorney. Throughout his career, he's been successful at litigating several cases, one involving the rights and redistricting in San Diego, and also dealing with United Farm Workers who are seeking better conditions in Yuma. Recently, he has gone into private practice, and of course, he's founded the National Center for Regulatory Reform. So it's my honor at this moment to introduce to you Michael Aguirre.
Hello, students. I'm really happy to be here. My daughter is currently at Cambridge University on a Fulbright, and she's from San Diego, and she went to Princeton, and she went to Harvard Law School. And if she were standing here right now, she'd say, please don't say anything that's embarrassing to the students that are there. So I know I'm under an enormous amount of pressure. I'm much more at ease talking with folks that are more my age than your age, but I'm going to try to give it a go. Who wins the mayor's race is really important morally. There are moral issues at stake that directly affect your futures more than my future and your parents' future. Very bad decisions were made to saddle the city with over $8 billion worth of debt. I have detailed how the decisions were made. I have the documents showing who made the decisions, when they were made. And those decisions have resulted in a pension that right now is $8 billion with 7,000 people retired, and it's going to have another 7,000 come along. And no one has done anything to reduce the debt that you're going to have to pay. Now, what they have done is they have pulled the money from the roads, the rec centers, the fire protection, from the police, and we pay pensions that are so big that they exceed how much the IRS allows pension to be paid because they're too rich. The IRS limits pensions to a certain level, and if you pay more than that, you're not permitted to do that because it's considered against public policy. And what we do in San Diego is we then take the amount that's in excess of what the IRS permits, and we go over to the city budget, and we take it out of the city budget every year. So we have people getting $300,000 pensions and taking $70,000 or $100,000 out of the city budget. Politics is about choices. Politics is about choices. And we as a community now are faced with the choice of not having enough money to pay for the roads, which require $160 million a year just to maintain them, to keep our rec centers open and our libraries open. Now, you know, if you go to Country Day, you may not need to go to a rec center because you have fabulous facilities here. Maybe you do, or you may not need to go to a library. But there are lots of places in San Diego when kids go to the library on a Sunday or a Monday and it's closed, or they go to their rec center, or an elderly person who's in rehab can't get into the rec center, it really makes a difference in the quality of their lives, and it also makes a difference in our ability to keep kids off the street and to keep kids from joining gangs and engaging in violence in less fortunate communities. And so basically the reason I say it's a moral issue is because government wasn't set up to primarily pay pensions to former city workers. It was set up to deliver services to the community. And what's happened inside government in San Diego is everything's been turned around. The government doesn't exist to serve the people, but the people exist to serve the government. And that is a huge problem that we have to deal with. And right now, as the mayor candidates are coming before you, what you're going to see is this. Our brothers and sisters in the Republican Party have made make-believe that the problems are solved. Our former mayor had a press conference on February the 23rd, 2012, in which he said the San Diego structural budget deficit has ended. Today I'm pleased to announce the city's decade-long structural budget deficit is history. Mayor's city structural budget deficit is over. That's what he told the public. It was even on TV. City budget deficit is over. But if you go back to the numbers, what you see is the way he ended the budget deficit was in 2011, he reduced the city's fire protection budget to $188 million, and he increased the pension payment to $229, and he dropped the road payment to $26. We need $160 at bare minimum. Does that sound like you've solved the structural budget? You know, there's this, I'm a trial lawyer, and there's this famous trial lawyer teacher that says that his son used to put his hands in front of his eyes, and when he did that, he thought that the people disappeared. Ayn Rand said, and I'm a liberal Democrat in case you want to know, but Ayn Rand said that you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. Now, because I have children that are your age and a little bit older, my focus as city attorney was your generation. And the reason for that is that when I came into politics, when I was your age, more precisely, John Kennedy was president. And John Kennedy, the whole point of what he was about, what he told the Democratic Party in 1960 when he accepted the nomination, he said, "My campaign is not about a set of promises. It's about a set of challenges, offering up not what I expect to give the American people, but what I expect to ask of them. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." That whole thing's been turned around. And my generation, the baby boomers, are taking more than they're leaving. And we're leaving it on your shoulders. That is not acceptable to me. I will not, if I'm the mayor, I will not do that. Because why? Because it's immoral. It's not proper. It's unfair. You should have a secure water supply. Right now, San Diego lives under the sword of a water sword of Damocles. A thin thread connects us to the very tail end of the Colorado River Basin in Yuma, and we import 90% of our water. We pump 180 million gallons of water out into the ocean every day. There is technology that would allow us to capture that water and to recycle it. As the mayor of San Diego, I intend to start something called the San Diego Water Security Project, the San Diego Water Project, to get you water security so that by the time that you are your parents' age, the next 20 years or so, we have secure water for you. That is going to be a priority. I want to get the roads repaired. We're so far behind on the roads. The roads are essential to the economy. I'd like to see us do the Olympics, not because of the Olympics, but because the Olympics will help to organize and measure the best of both sides and give us the opportunity to create planning, interdependence, and a dynamic that will set the stage to create the environment and the economy that will bring us true greatness. We will never be great, or as great as we can be, until we integrate our economy and the 4 million consumers that live in the Cava, the San Diego and Baja region. And that's so important. You know, there's a wonderful professor from UC Berkeley who said that he analyzed 20 cities at their greatest. And he said the key to a city's greatness is to recognize what it is. You know, Hollywood became great because they invented a little box that Eastern Europeans that were factory workers and workers in New York could put a penny in and turn and entertain themselves. And all those pennies flowed and eventually became what they are today. And so that's another thing I want to do, is I want to make sure that we have an economic basis, we have a strong water supply, and then I would like to see solar panels in every roof and an electric car in every driveway. No more gasoline. No more carbon. I want to treat the carbon problem as an emergency that it is. Now, the one thing I want you to know is I can really keep my cards close to the vest. For 4 years, I was able to hide the fact, as city attorney, that I'm an exceedingly likable person. And I think that everybody in San Diego would agree with that. I'm a lifelong Democrat. And I told the Democrats when they were considering their candidates that the other candidates really already had all the endorsements they needed, but that I actually needed their endorsement. And I reminded them that the Democrats were always about helping people in need. Unfortunately, they weren't moved. Last night we had a debate in Rancho Santa Fe. Do you know, I don't know if I should say this, but do you know that there are Democrats that live in Rancho Santa Fe? I was shocked. And you know what? They also go to the country club there. And I decided, maybe being a country club liberal isn't that bad from what I saw. But we had a wonderful discussion last night between the candidates. I wish you could have heard it. I think I can do almost every candidate's speech I've heard them so much by now, and I enjoy listening to them, I really do. But here's the thing that is the biggest difference. They are running and taking the system as it is and trying to work with it as best they can. I'm actually running against the system because the system isn't working. You tell me, why would the city's smallest union put hundreds of thousands of dollars into the campaign of a 33-year-old, 3-year council member? Why would they do that? Why would they spend and have most of the money come from Washington, D.C.? And the answer is because that $8 billion that I talked about, that is the pension debt, which requires a $275 million payment every year, or at least it receives it. We see that as a burden, but there are some people that see that as a benefit. They see it as an asset. They see it as a good thing, because that's $8 billion of wealth that they can take out of our system and have us pay. And the reason that the unions are prepared to pay for that, the firefighters and the POA and the MEA, the Municipal Employees Association, and the AFSCME Local 127, is because they're making a ton of money, but it's not just the unions. The people that make the most money are the attorneys. When I went into the city attorney's office, I said, you know what? You guys were part of a deal in which you agreed to give somebody a special benefit that was on the pension board if they increased benefits and decreased contributions. That was improper. We're not taking the money. I'm not going to take a pension at all, and you're going to have to give up the improper part of your pensions because it was a violation of your fiduciary duties as attorneys to do that. And of course, they said, that is a great idea. We're going to give up our pensions because you asked us to. If only we would have thought of that ourselves. Well, that's not exactly their reaction. Would you believe that they would have liked to have strung me up? I know what a hostile work environment is like, let me tell you. You tell a bunch of attorneys who are planning on being millionaires that you're going to strip away half the money that they're counting on receiving, and that's the kind of reaction that I got was incredible. But back then, no one was really talking about pensions. The only reason I ever learned anything about the pensions is that as an assistant U.S. attorney, I happened to help out a group of laborers, and we ended up indicting 17 people for pension fraud. And we took over their pension and reorganized it and saved the pension. And that led me into a career in which I went to work for the United States Senate, and I worked for the same committee that John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy worked on. John Kennedy as a senator and Robert Kennedy as the chief counsel. And what I found out is that the Kennedy brothers back in the late 50s actually led an investigation into all these kinds of problems, the corruption problems and the unions and the pensions, but that was on the private side, and they passed very powerful reform laws, and you don't have the problems on the private side, pensions and unions, as you do on the public side. The public unions and pensions are unregulated completely. There's no regulation whatsoever. The collective bargaining that takes place, that's when the unions and get together with management, and they both set their salaries, and the taxpayers really have no one there because everybody that's there is going to get the benefit of the collective bargained amounts, including our council members. Do you know that a council member can retire after 4 years? We had one council member that was in federal prison, and he was getting in his 30s, and he was getting a pension. You see how crazy that is? I think that my campaign is not just about pensions. It's about getting the city to become the number one when it comes to careful decisions. I want to replace the lobbyists and what I call the influence peddlers with scientists, statisticians, librarians, analysts, public policy analysts. When I went to the Kennedy School of Government, I studied public administration, and I learned what can be done. I mean, there really are some very powerful things that we can do. For example, let's take the convention center or the downtown ballpark, or the football stadium. Right now, the Chargers are making more money in what they call in-stadium revenue. In-stadium revenue is the drinks, the tickets for the seats, the food, anything, the parking. That's called in-stadium revenue. The Chargers are making more in-stadium revenue than they've ever made. They charge amongst the higher side on the ticket prices. They want to have a new stadium, but if we build a new stadium, and they want to have the new stadium have 59,000 seats instead of 70. So if we build the new stadium, it's going to have to generate enough money not only to pay them what they're earning now, but then another 40 or 50 million to make the annual payments on the bonds that would be necessary to build the stadium. Whereas right now, they're in a much better position because there are no bond payments, the very minimal ones, and the city pays for those. Now, if the public votes for that, and I have to tell you, there are thousands of people in San Diego, when you say the Chargers, it's not just that they're fans. It's that Charger Day is family day. Charger Day is when the family gets together all throughout the city, and it's a basis to come together. It's an excuse for everybody to say, hey, you're going to watch the game? Yeah, come on over and watch the game. So that's a good thing, and we don't want the Chargers to leave. And if the public votes to have a new stadium, we should have it. And the one thing you have to give credit to the Chargers for is they've said that they're willing to put their proposal on the ballot, and they're willing to combine it with the convention center, which is kind of intelligent because the convention center in and of itself is the expansion. A strong enough case really hasn't been made that that's the only thing in the world that's going to be helpful to the convention center, and what I mean by that is this. Expanding the convention center doesn't mean that we're going to get more business. Las Vegas, which is the #1 convention site in the country, doubled the size of their convention center, and they're getting the same amount of money now as they were before they doubled the size of it. And the reason for that is that there's more convention space than there are conventions. And so we've got ourselves in this business where more and more convention space is chasing fewer and fewer conventions. Now, that may be what we have to do. And if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But if we're going to do that, at least let's use the same principles they used when they did the Jack Murphy Stadium, when they combined baseball and football. And instead of having 10 games a year, they had 100 games because they had, or I should say 90 games. They had 80 games for baseball and 10 for football. At least if we did that, what the Chargers is suggesting, and we combine it, we'll have much more use of the stadium because it'll be part of the convention center. That's a mixed use kind of plan. And to the Chargers' credit, they want to put it on the ballot. The other people want to impose a tax with no vote. And you see, the way they went about doing that, there was no careful, rigorous analysis, which is what we need to do before we spend any money to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the dollar. There was no careful, rigorous analysis. They put all of the people that hope to benefit from it on a board, and then they did make-believe. If you read, none of the work they did is cited. I mean, they don't cite back to sources. I don't know, do you guys ever do footnotes here? Have you come to footnotes yet? That's just a joke. I know you have done to footnotes. Okay. Well, look, I have a lot more to say, but I want to encourage you to ask any questions. I hope that you'll ask some questions. I want to recommend a book to you. And my brother George is such a book reader. He is. I don't even want to tell you what his house looks like with all those books. And I understand, I have inside information that he literally has to smuggle the books in through the family because they're so tired of him bringing in books. But this is the book I'd like you to think about. It's written by a man named George Lakoff, and it's called The Political Mind. And I hope that you'll consider that, because this book does a fabulous job of explaining how people think about the moral issues of politics. And our brothers and sisters on the conservative side have done a great job of appealing to voters on visceral moral issues, and those of us who are on the progressive side, we have not done as good a job. And we need to improve the way in which we communicate with the public about the moral issues that are on our side, the more progressive side, and to be able to articulate that. And I hope that you'll consider the George Lakoff book. Thank you very, very much. I know that I may not have found the exact words to be of entertainment to you, but I am hoping that we can maybe liven it up during your questions, and I hope the students will ask some questions, if you don't mind, even, just so we can get things rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for bringing us, moving this forum, the four-candidate forum, off to a great start. We look forward to all the future candidates as well. And I know that there are a lot of questions to be asked. I have the first question, and that is, Mike, you are distinguishing yourself from the other three candidates, saying that the other three candidates are running within the system, you're running against the system. So we've seen what's happened in Washington with gridlock. If you're running against the system, how do you see moving forward as mayor that you'll be able to function within the government?
Thank you. You see, and this is the important issue. One of the things that I learned as city attorney is every single elected official goes down to City Hall with a key. And that key allows that elected official to participate in the discussion about what is the public interest. And every other official has to respect, especially when you don't agree, you have to respect the reality of everyone else's right to participate. What that leads you to is the kind of conflict resolution that you're so good at, which means that you look for marginal and optimum ways, what they call at the Kennedy School, constrained optimization. You look to optimize by persuasion. You make your case. I am going to go to the public, and I'm going to make my case. I'm going to argue the case to the public. I'm going to take the facts. I'm going to work as hard as I can with council members to convince them of the need to make better choices in how we spend our money. But you can only do it that way. And one of the things that I love about running for mayor is it's much more like student body president. I was ASUC co-president at UC Berkeley, vice president at Berkeley, and vice president of my undergraduate. And it was so different running for city attorney, because city attorney, you had to enforce the law, and you have to, we're going to look at what poor Jan Goldsmith had to do in dealing with Bob Filner. He had to actually sue the mayor, and I have to really laugh, because everyone said to me, oh my gosh, you're so controversial, but I never sued the mayor. I mean, that was pretty good, And so the answer to your question is something like President Kennedy said, you can think boldly, but you have to act with discretion. And I think I probably have learned that lesson about as well as anybody possibly could, because I went in with all the right motives, but I saw myself more as the person on the white horse coming in to save the public, when in fact that was the wrong model to have in my mind. Thank you.
Well, at this point, I'm going to open the floor to questions, and as you state the question, I'll repeat them so that we capture it on the video. Yes?
What are your views regarding voter ID laws?
What are your views regarding voter ID laws?
Thank you. I am opposed to voter ID laws. I have spent a lifetime bringing voting rights lawsuits. Here in San Diego, I brought a lawsuit back in 1990 to achieve district elections based on enforcement of Section 2 of the voting rights laws, and then to have a reapportionment, which then made it possible for voters to elect people of choice, and led to African Americans being elected in District 4 and Latinos in District 8. And that wasn't by accident. We brought in folks from Caltech that typically had supported the Justice Department's voting rights. I hired them as experts and actually drew the boundaries during a conflict resolution mediation in Judge Harry R. McHugh's office with getting the parties on both sides of the city to go along with it. I think that there's a Pulitzer Prize-winning book called The Vote, which talks about the long struggle to finally get universal voting. And the author says, and at the very moment that we got universal voting, we then had the complete domination of our electoral system by concentrated wealth. And so at the very moment that people had achieved the opportunity to vote with one hand, they lost what that really meant with the other because of the complete domination of the vote. In this election, that the folks that are running the election as independent expenditures are actually massively outspending the actual candidates themselves. So that means that you have candidates that don't even control the campaign that's being run for them to get them to be elected to office. And the result of that is folks that are impoverished and don't have the dollars to contribute are right back in the same position that they were in when they didn't have the vote to contribute to begin with. So that's how I feel about voter ID. Thank you.
Next question. George?
Mr. Aguirre, I know your views about city attorney. I know you understand the history of city attorney in San Diego. But California is different from most of the country where city attorneys are appointed. When John Hickenlooper was the mayor of Denver, came to San Diego, I introduced him to a group of business leaders, and he talked about the fact that his city attorney was appointed by the mayor. But here, we have always had this history of electing them. Just expand a little bit about that and why you think there's that difference.
Thank you, George.
Why is there a difference in San Diego from other jurisdictions where the city attorney is elected, where in other jurisdictions the city attorney is appointed?
Thank you. Well, you know, it's a very, very interesting part of San Diego history. And in 1929, there was a charter reform commission that put a new charter on the ballot, and it was defeated. And it was defeated because there was a judgment made that, in part, that the voters wanted to elect the city attorney because they were tired of the person who was in charge of the law acting as a rubber stamp of the city council and the mayor and not enforcing the law in a public interested way. So in 1931, they put a new ballot proposal for a new charter, which is our existing charter. And in that charter, they decided that the city attorney would be a separate branch of city government in charge of the law, and that the voters would be the ones who would hire the city attorney, and the voters would have a direct relationship with the city attorney just as they do with the mayor. And in 31 that passed, a young man named Austin was elected in 1931, a reformer, and he actually came up with an additional idea to create something that I want to do, which was called an unemployment bond. And they sold unemployment bonds so they could hire people who were unemployed, and that was after 2 years into the Depression. We have areas of San Diego that are at Depression levels now. And they hired people to rebuild the infrastructure of the city, which we can do again. But the point of the independent city attorney is that the city attorney was elected to make sure that the public interest was always vindicated. And that, yes, the city attorney represents the mayor and city council as elected officials, but the city attorney's fundamental duty, as all elected officials, is to the public as a whole. And when elected officials violate the law, for example, in connection with the pension, or unfortunately in connection with what happened with Bob, who was a friend of mine, and I still consider him a friend. I'm very sad that he went through and did what he did, and I in no way excuse or in any way minimize it. And I hope that he can find some way to recompense and to find peace within his soul. But when it came to enforcing the law, he had to be sued, and he was. And that's just the way that the voters in California, you know, the voters in California did something else that's unusual. Unlike all other states, or most other states, we are a direct democracy. And this was done actually by the progressives at the turn of the century in 1911, 12, and 13. And we have the referendum, the recall, and the initiative, which transformed us into a more direct democracy state. So the voters themselves have decided in California to play a much bigger role in their government than is the case elsewhere throughout the United States.
Further questions? Yes.
Mr. Aguirre,
Mike?
how do you plan on getting people within our city government to agree with you on your views of pension reform? And how long do you believe it will take before we do see true pension reform?
How do you see bringing people in city government to come around to your side on pension reform, and how long do you think it'll take until we actually have pension reform?
Well, I'm going to bring him in and have him help us do conflict resolution. Well, you know, let me tell you that in Rhode Island, the treasurer of Rhode Island basically went down the road that I'm talking about, and the treasurer issued reports that showed very clearly the amounts of money that were being paid on pension, and then spent the time educating the public. And that's the first thing I have to do, is, as Abraham Lincoln said, nothing can be done without public opinion. No, he said it the other way around. He said, everything can be done with public opinion on your side. Nothing can be done without it. So the first thing is to educate the public. And you see, the mayor has that ability. And what I intend to do is to use the actuary who I hired when I was city attorney, who is still the outside actuary for the city for special projects, not the pension plan, but the outside actuary for the city on special projects. And I intend to use that actuary to show the public the difference between what people actually earned and then the other benefits they got when they received retroactive benefits, or they bought service credits that they didn't pay for, or they used purchase service credits to get early retirement after only working 15 years, and then once they were into early retirement, they went into drop, and they just rigged the system. I want to pull all that out and remind people, hey, look, we used to have a system that worked. You had certainty of investment policy, which was risk-free investment policy, which was government bonds, and you had certainty of payout, but at lower numbers. What happened now is all your generation, when you go to hire people to work on the water and the wastewater and police and all that, you're going to be hamstrung because you won't be able to offer the same benefit package as other cities can, because of our abuses, all that was taken away from you. So you're going to be paying this generation, you're going to be paying them excess amounts, you're going to be paying them Cadillac pension amounts, while when you're employing your workers, they're going to have to live off of a 401k. You see, that's why I'm so dedicated to it. It eventually will be changed no matter what any of us do, and we will get to where Detroit is eventually. But I'm hoping that we can do that earlier. And how long? I don't know. You know, it just depends on how long does it take for an idea whose time has come to be recognized. And I think part of it is the more we get young people, you know, the people that are really directly affected by this, understanding the issue and realizing it's not in their best interest to go with the fluff, but it's best to go with careful analysis about what is going to advance your future and to recognize the difference. You know, Robert Kennedy was the person who got me involved in politics, and let me tell you, if he were alive today, this would not have happened. I can tell you right now, it would not have happened. It is only because of the fact that our greatest leaders were assassinated that we're even in this hole that we are in. We never would have gotten here. This never would have happened. This never would have been permitted to happen. But what happens is elected officials do better to not solve problems and to talk about ways that sound like they're solving problems, but they're not. They engage in sophistry, and we end up with, you know, basically just the problems getting worse and worse. I mean, so you have this anomaly where the mayor says the structural deficit is over, but then you look at the pension plan and you say, well, wait a minute, Mayor Sanders, when you took over it was $6 billion, now it's $8 billion, the payment was $161, now it's $275. how can it be over? It's actually worse. So I think that what I will do, though, is I'm going to ask you to personally get involved in getting this done, and I'm going to assign you part of the task, and then I'm going to put you on a very short time leash so you can get this thing done, and by the time you get out of high school.
Well, it looks like you have a new job coming up. Yes?
Can you address the homeless issue, and also what is your plan to maximize the San Diego brand in the global economy?
Okay.
Please address the homeless issue and look at how to deal with the brand in terms of San Diego in the global economy.
Okay. Well, on homeless, we have to recognize that in San Diego County, we have more homeless than they do in Chicago. We are the third largest homeless population in the United States. And our homeless population is going up. When I was city attorney, I issued a legal opinion based on a Ninth Circuit ruling that said the police could not put into jail homeless people for sleeping unless a case could be made that there was a shelter that they were declining to go to. And of course, there were not. When you have 10,000 homeless people, and that's countywide, if you split it in half, that's 5,000, and I don't think that would be probably the right proportion. It's probably many more than 5,000. So we have to figure out, well, what does the homeless look like? How are we going to deal with that? And my answer is proactively. I want to use caseworkers and have the homeless assigned to those caseworkers and have our homeless cataloged. And what I mean by cataloged, and that's probably not the right word, but by catalog, I mean that we break down the homeless into subsets, those that are at one extreme, violent and threats to the safety of the public, and they have to be dealt with in a more extreme way. And at the other end of the continuum, we have those who, for one reason or another, have recently dropped out of the system. They maybe just lost a job in the month or two before, didn't have enough money to pay their rent, and had no place to go. And for them, we have to find a way to move them back into the system. But here's the biggest change that, if I'm mayor, that will be made. We will accept the moral obligation as the city of San Diego to provide shelter for the homeless, period. That is another moral issue, and we will all be totally ashamed of ourselves if we have the amount of wealth that we have in San Diego and we have a situation where we can't even provide the most minimum level of subsistence and of housing or shelter. I believe when we come to these questions in the Good Samaritan, and I think that San Diego ought to cross over to the other side of the street and do as Dr. King said, put the question, what will happen to that person if we don't help them, rather than asking what will happen to us if we do help them.
A couple more questions. Yes?
I have a question regarding the science and technology. As a mayor, how would you promote the development of high-tech in San Diego? We know that San Diego is central for tech, for telecommunications, and as mayor, how would you continue to promote that and fight against other places to attract the people away from San Diego?
How will you promote the continued growth of technology in San Diego, and what will you do to attract top scientists and others coming to San Diego?
Thank you. Well, first of all, there's a really good commentary in the paper this morning that I commend to you about this issue, and I was reading about this morning at about 4 o'clock this morning, so I'm glad you asked this question. Because one of the things that we were learning about is that it's not just the technology that's important, but it's the process by which you get to the technology that's important, the pathway. And a lot of the pathways to technology are pathways that were unsuccessful, but people learn from. And so, in a sense, you have to have enough resources to explore pathways that may not give you a complete answer, but they give you some insight on how to solve problems. Here's what I'd like to do. Attracting scientists to San Diego occurs, I think, every day because of Connect. Connect has done an amazingly good job, both in the life sciences and elsewhere. But beyond that, I think that the concept of co-development, the concept of creating companies that can refuel themselves, the idea that we tie research centers with companies to then create products that allow for profit-making and commercial sides, I think that's going on pretty well in San Diego. They just moved a very important conference for innovative technology from Texas to San Diego. You may know about that. It's coming up later on in the month. But I have a little bit of a part of this that I'd like to expand the scope of the partnership between research to take a page out of Jane Jacobs' book, the great scholar on economies of cities, and use that to expand all of our local businesses. Importing scientists is a very worthy goal, and if we can do that, I will do everything I can as mayor to support that. But creating scientists, that's what I like. I want to know how many young people that are out there, wherever, that we can get interested in engineering and mathematics. I was an attorney. If I had to do it over again, I'd have definitely gone into engineering. And let me say why. Lawyers are critical thinkers. We tear down ideas. We challenge ideas. And out of that challenge, we hope that the truth emerges. Engineers, from the perspective of the great thinking coach, Edward de Bono, engineers think about what doesn't exist, and then they make it exist. They think about, and Robert Kennedy used to say this in a way, he would say some people see things as they are and ask why, critical thinkers. Other people see what they ask what might be, and they say, why not? And that's what engineers do. And one of the things that I love about engineering is if you get a new software program and you start working your way through it, whether it's Excel or whatever, you start to see what these engineers can see that you could not see, that someone like myself could never see. But you can follow their tracks, and in doing that, they explode the scope of your imagination, of your creativity, of your way of looking at the world. And they take you into even broader worlds. This last summer, I go to the UC Berkeley Lair of the Bear. It's a family summer camp. We love going there. And I was talking with this particle physicist who was explaining to me the concept of dark energy or black energy. And I was able to go with him for about one or two levels of discussion. But it was amazing to see that. And that's what we want San Diego to be. That's why I want to transform the whole office of city mayor away from PR people that we're so overwhelmed with PR and lobbyists and pollsters. And instead, when you walk into the city mayor's office, we're going to have scientists, we're going to have policy analysts, we're going to have librarians, we're going to have researchers, we're going to have statisticians, we're going to have people that can do regression analysis, multivariate regression analysis, operations research, and all the things that I learned at the Kennedy School that you can do to optimize within your constraints. And in doing that, the most important thing I'm going to do to try to make sure we do what you're suggesting is to talk to the best minds in San Diego who are in the forefront of doing that, listen to them very, very, very carefully, and then carry out my responsibilities based upon the agenda that they have laid before me. And that's what we're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us all wish candidate Michael Aguirre the best of luck in the coming weeks and give him a round of applause for today's time. Thank you.